Before we get started, all right, before we get started, let me just say that today, all right, we're going to cover some very important information about the seminar, about the PSLE, and you guys, please keep the chat clean, all right? I'm aware maybe some of us are students, right? Some of us are parents, but out of consideration for everybody, let's not spam the chat, okay? So with that said, I think we can officially begin today's seminar. So today we're here to talk about preparing for PSLE Math. All right, and I am Teacher Belinda. This is the rerun of the seminar that Teacher Jason has done previously. So if you came for the seminar on Wednesday, then this is probably the same content. Okay, so maybe let me start off by introducing myself. My name is Belinda. So this was back when, PSLE still had a T-score. So yeah, I'm pretty old, all right? Probably you guys, some of us parents, you might remember that before the AL system, PSLE had a T-score, and I scored 276 at that time. All right, I graduated from Princeton University a couple of years ago, and I was from the GEP, and I also participated in various math Olympiads. All right, ultimately, I went into RI, RGS, and I've taught for over 3 years. So yeah, if you guys have questions about the PSLE or any of my experiences, all right, you guys can stay until the end and wait till the Q&A session to ask me any questions that you might have. All right, so apart from me who teaches the Think Academy PSLE program, there's also Teacher Jason. So some of you guys might know him from the other seminar, right? He's in charge of our PSLE curriculum, and he graduated from NTU with various Math Olympiad awards as well, and over 5 years of teaching experience. So today, we are gathered here to talk more about the PSLE and how to help you and your kids score as best as possible, preferably AL1. All right, so the first topic I'm going to cover is going to be about the PSLE, as well as how it's going to affect your child's future. I mean, all of us are very aware, right, that PSLE is important. You guys don't need me to tell you that, right? But how exactly are the ALs categorized, right? Are there any alternatives to the PSLE? We can discuss this a little bit in detail. And then I think the meat of today's seminar, right, what most of you guys are here for is to hear about the statistical analysis, right? So over the past few years, how has the PSLE changed, especially with the introduction of the AL system? Is there any super important things that we need to look out for? And last but not least, right, some preparation tips and tricks from me as well as Teacher Jason, right, who's seen quite a few years of students taking the PSLE, right? Any tips that they have to share with us, we can also pass on to you guys, right? And also, I'll talk a little bit about the experiences of our students who have taken the PSLE in previous years. Okay, so overall, right, these are the 3 major topics. And if you guys have questions, all right, you guys can ask in the chat, and we'll wait until the end of today's seminar, and I'll answer all of your questions then. So let's start by talking about the experience from PSLE to secondary school. So let me introduce again the AL system and how it affects students, especially for math. All right, we'll also talk a little bit about the DSA selection exercise. So recently, I've talked to several of my parents, right? And I've realized maybe not everybody is familiar with the AL system, especially because for those of you in my generation, right? Or maybe back when we took the PSLE, it was all T-score calculated. But nowadays, right, as our students in the chat would know, you guys are all ranked according to AL. And this is very similar to the O-level system, right? Your AL1 is the best, AL8 is the worst. And to get into your dream school, maybe you guys need around at least AL6, right, or AL8. So overall, the PSLE T-score has been replaced with wider scoring bands, also known as achievement levels. So the government did this because ideally it would make the PSLE less competitive, right? I don't know, maybe some of the students in the chat, you guys might be shaking your head at this statement right now, and you're like, well, in what way is it less competitive? I feel the same level of stress. And you would be right, because the AL system is both a kind and a cruel change in many ways, right? It's kind because previously, right, when we looked at T-score 270 versus 276, for example, would still have quite a bit of difference, right? If you were like 294, for example, you're in the newspaper. But if you're not 294, you're not in the newspaper. That's just one major difference. But nowadays, 294, 270, that's all AL1. You don't exactly know, right, if you're the best of the best or you're just the best. So small differences between students are removed. However, that's not necessarily a good thing, right? Because as you guys can see from the marks range, 90 versus 89 has an extremely big gap. The same with like 85 versus 84, right? Or any of these scores between the ALs. I mean, what's so different between 89 and 90 besides one whole grade? So then, right, even one mark can be very, very important in how your child's AL goes, and it can have a very significant change when you apply to top schools. All right, and apart from that, because as you guys know, your dream schools, RI, RGS, Hwa Chong, right, NUS High, Nanyang, they're all oversubscribed. So apart from your PSLE, you might also be forced to rely on extracurriculars if there are many people within the range of AL4 to AL6. All right, and I'm sure, right, our students in the chat here, you've all experienced, I have to go for piano lessons, and then I have my art lessons, and then I have soccer, and I have to go for Teacher Bell's Think Academy. Oh my God, right? So, well, students are also a lot more busy than before because of all of these extracurricular pressures. Okay, so here's a rough breakdown of the AL system. And what this basically means, right, is that in order to do very well for PSLE, you have to not only know your stuff, but also actually guarantee that you get every possible mark, because you don't want to be that person who scores 89 instead of 90. All right, so, well, speaking of the PSLE, there's actually an alternative route. Okay, so I'm discussing this because I've been asked a lot about the DSA recently, especially from students in my class. All right, and the DSA, also known as the Direct School Admission for Secondary Schools, allows students to apply to some schools before you take the PSLE. So for those of you who already have a very clear idea of what school you want, right? Maybe some of you really, really would like to go to NUS High, for instance. You can apply to these schools based on the following categories. So some of you guys are your school's sports stars, right? Some of you taken part in a lot of art competitions or music competitions, or you're very good at public speaking or math or science or languages, whatever you're good at, all right, that is ample cause for applying to DSA. So I would highly recommend DSA, especially if you are clear as to what school you want to go to. And this is because if you actually get into DSA, then you don't really need to care as much for the PSLE, right? I mean, of course, you still have to do well, right? But unless you score super terribly, the school is not going to kick you out. Okay, so I highly recommend all interested students who know your dream school to try out for DSA. The exercise will start somewhere around like May, if I remember correctly. So this will also help you to reduce PSLE stress when the time comes. And sure, right, I think a lot of us, probably you're with Think Academy for math, or you're in our groups because you like math and you want to learn more about math, right? So many people have asked me about NUS High, which is a pretty special scenario. So I don't know if you guys know this, but NUS High doesn't care about your PSLE score. All right, they only accept admissions through DSA. So if you guys would like to get into NUS High, make sure that your math Olympiad, science competition, resume, and portfolio are prepared before the DSA. So you guys should have some experience in math Olympiad or various science competitions. Okay, once you do that, you get selected, you go for the NUS High selection test, you pass that, you're in. And then they don't really care about the PSLE. Okay, so NUS High is a special case. If you guys are interested in the NUS High admissions process, you can ask me more about it at the end of today's seminar. Okay, so now we've laid down the big picture of the PSLE, right? Of course, AL is important, The essay is important, but ultimately, everybody has to take the PSLE. And that's why you're here, because you want to do well for the PSLE. So in order to do well, we don't really have a ton of time left. Most of us have about, what, seven months, right, till the PSLE, less than that, actually. So what's most important now is knowing what to study, how to study, when to study. And this is where knowing what happened in the previous years of PSLE becomes very, very helpful. All right, so let's look here at the past few years of PSLE to decide how and what to prepare to really ace the math section. So what Think Academy has done, right, is together with teacher Jason, we've basically looked at every single question across the past 10 or so years, right? Clearly, the last 5 years are more relevant because several topics have been taken out over the past years and some have been inserted into the MOE curriculum, right? But overall, we've looked at every single question, categorized them, right, under what topic, and also allocated the marks so we can give you a more detailed analysis, okay? So here's the big picture, right? This is the super big picture, a bird's eye view, okay? And you can see that overall, the super big picture is that we have 3 major topics, okay? The first belongs to number and algebra. The second is measurement and geometry. The third is statistics, okay? And basically, all this page tells you, okay, is that broad perspective, calculation is very important. And I want to emphasize on this because recently I've had many students tell me, oh, Teacher Bell, you don't have to keep telling us that carelessness is important or whatever. We have the calculator, all right? But the calculator doesn't save you during section A and B, nor does it save you from making fundamental careless mistakes where you think you have the answer so you don't press the calculator. All right, so what I want to say is, for those of us who are already coming up with excuses that, oh, it's because I'm careless, right? It's not because you're careless, it's because you're bad at calculation. So before the PSLE, right, from just a broad perspective, whether it's in number, algebra, measurement, geometry, or statistics, make sure that we sort out our calculation skills. Okay, and of course, this is just a big topic. I'm sure you guys are already aware of these topics. So let's look into a little bit more detail. So on our next page, all right, over here, we have the substrands between the topics of the PSLE. So you can see we start with some very basic stuff, whole numbers, right? Moving on into more detailed calculation topics, fractions, right? We also have geometry, so on and so forth. So the blue bar here represents the number of questions that we've seen over the past 5 years, okay? And the red line represents how many marks they are worth. So you can see that clearly, right? For example, a topic like decimals, there are a lot of questions, but you don't really get much out of it because there's very few marks, which also says that decimals are more likely to appear in section A and B, right? Because you don't have one of those like 20 mark part A, part B, part C question allocated to it. On the other hand, right, it's very clear that this particular bar, area and volume, right, not only does it have quite a bit of questions, it also has a lot more marks than questions allocated. So what does that mean? It means that at the end of the paper, in section C, right, when you have your huge, like 7, 8 mark questions, a lot of them tend to be area and volume. Okay, so generally, here's how we interpret the different parts of the PSLE, right? And looking into more detail, how exactly does this help us study, right? So let's look at our final graph here. All right, I know it's a little bit scattered. All right, don't worry, I'll break this down for you guys. Okay, the first thing that I want to focus on is our 2 really high red bars. Okay, what do the red bars mean? That's just the raw marks that have been allocated to these topics. So y'all can see that there are 2 topics that will shoot up way above the rest, and these are angles and statistics, all right? For many of us, these aren't exactly super hard topics, right? But for students who are currently at an AL3 or 4 level, right, these are the most valuable topics, right? If you get these topics, you score the most amount of marks. So make sure you guys have already mastered these two topics, angles and statistics. Okay, some students have asked me, Teacher Bell, what is statistics? Okay, so let me explain. Statistics are the kind of questions which include bar graphs, right? Pie charts. Maybe you guys also have line graphs, right? You know, questions where you have the bar and they're like, oh, my dog ate a corner of my paper, so I can't see this number, right? Can you guys draw in the missing bar, or can you guys find how much this bar is? Yeah, those kind of questions. Those are statistics. All right. And basically for students at AL 1 and 2, I'm already assuming that you guys are pretty good at angles and statistics. All right, because these aren't exactly usually the difficult questions of the PSLE. Okay, before I talk about what's difficult, I want to pay special attention to these two at the bottom, speed algebra. All right, many parents have expressed their worry to me about speed and algebra because these are brand new sparkling P6 topics. And most of us might not have a lot of practice with speed and algebra, right? But still, you guys can see that in reality, speed and algebra are quite rare, right? Marks-wise. So don't worry too much, right? If we are not super familiar with them, of course, it's good to know them very well, right? But they don't take up a big part of the PSLE. So now, what advice can I give for students who are already at AL 1 and 2 and you guys want to maintain this level, right? So in that case, I would look at these challenging topics with high marks per question to tackle, okay? So you guys see the green line? That's basically how many marks per question. And for these important topics, right, you can see the number of questions, the bar is very little, right? But you have a lot of marks. What does that mean? It means these are all your section C topics, okay? So for things like patterns, fractions, word problems, right? Volumes, circles. If you've ever done a PSLE past year paper, which I'm sure many of our students in the chat are currently struggling with, right? You would know that these tend to come out a lot in the difficult part of the paper. And then the next day they'll appear on the Straits Times. All right, so let's look at some examples of these difficult questions. So some of these are not exactly covered in school, right? Unless you're in the GEP, you don't really have a specific topic in school that be like, oh, this semester we're learning patterns, right? You're expected to just kind of know. And here is a question from the 2019 that appeared in Straits Times a few times, right? And this is a very typical patterns question. It probably, right, caused a lot of stress for the students that year. You guys can have a look. Maybe some of you can already know that you can solve this, or some of you realize that, oh, I've never learned this before, right? Then it's a good time to get familiar with how to solve patterns. Okay, just another example of a long question, 2020. This one, all right, many students, when they look at this, they're like, oh, it must be circles because they're rings, right? But firstly, okay, that's a wrong identification of the type of question. This is not circles, all right? This is actually a pattern question. And that's because we don't actually need any of the circle formulas, but you do have to know how the rings are hung, right? And what is the overlap. So that is the pattern part of this question. So yeah, one side note here, right? Knowing what kind of question it is very important in helping you solve it. And on to an actual circles question. All right, this is back to 2019, another difficult paper, another difficult question, right? This is on circles. So you guys can see that this kind of difficult questions, they don't really take more than you guys have learned in school. Everything you need to know is already taught. However, how do you apply it, right? That's where students who've had a lot of practice, students who've done years of past year papers, you guys would have a big advantage when it comes to students who don't get as much practice in math, okay? So, I mean, I'm not just saying this because I'm a teacher and I want you guys to do all your mock papers, right? But generally, if you've never seen this kind of question before, you guys will panic during the PSLE, right? And you wouldn't know how to solve it. if you've seen something similar, it will make your life a lot easier. Okay, so here's more or less what we've covered, right? And to this point, right, I would like to say that, given these statistics, of course, right, you guys can roughly decide what you want to focus on, but it's still down to your individual person, right? Don't just because, Teacher Bell says to study angles and statistics, so I spend all my time on angles and statistics, right? It doesn't work that way. You guys have to realize what you're bad at in school or what you're good at in school, right? And adjust your learning appropriately. So if you guys are not very sure, right, then this is the good time to take mock papers, look at your WA1, right, figure out where all your mistakes are, or if you have no mistakes, very good, right? But if you do have mistakes, where are these mistakes? What topics you're weak at, right? And what I recommend some of my students to do is to, every time you get a question wrong, you can put this particular question into an exercise book. And before the PSLE, you just look at your exercise book and do the questions that you got wrong. Okay, so that will be a pretty helpful practice. And for the rest of us, right, if you're not so sure what you're weak at, what you're good at, we do have some solutions for you that I'll talk about later on. Okay, so here's the breakdown of our PSLE past year papers. And now, all right, let's talk a little bit about how to do well for the PSLE, right? You guys kind of know what are the important topics, angles, statistics, circles, patterns, right? You guys know why the PSL is important. It's because we want to score 90 instead of 89, right? But there's only 7 months or less until the PSLE. So there must be some effective and efficient ways that we can score higher. Okay, the first thing that I would like to talk about is, let's start off with a poll. All right, so what are some problems that your child, or if you're a student, what are some problems that you guys face in math? All right, so this is the time to type into chat. All right, so do you like particular problems you guys might face? Like, for example, a lot of people say carelessness, right? That might be a significant problem. One here facing an issue with carelessness. You guys can type 1 into the chat if you think that your child or you, right, are facing a lot of issues with carelessness. I see some ones appearing in the chat. Only one, so everyone else here is perfectly careful all the time. Yeah. So carelessness, big issue for many parents, many kids, right? Let's talk about it. And any other problems that you guys can face, maybe time pressure, right? How many of us have actually can safely say that we've sat for many 2.5-hour papers before, right? At the end, we're probably super tired. How do we manage that? Again, Sandy says percentages, right? Specific topics that we're weak in, right? Patterns, right? We need to identify those as well. Great. So, all right, let's look at some important problems that many of us might face. All right, and the first thing, of course, I would like to talk about is this carelessness. Okay, at the end of every lesson in Think Academy, we have this 15 or 10-minute test. And without fail, all right, at the end of every test, I have students in the chat who are like, yeah, Teacher Bell, I scored 0 because I was careless. I could actually do every question. Okay, so carelessness is a common excuse from students to explain questions that they got wrong. But I mean, you guys know as well as I do, right? That if you get a question wrong for the PSLE, they don't care whether you know or you don't know or you're careless. Okay, so what does this mean? It means that from now on, first and foremost, we have to adjust our mentality, right? The first step to getting rid of carelessness is to cultivate the mentality that carelessness is not okay. So what do I mean by this? When you guys, especially students among us, right, or parents, we can also advise your students, your kids, when you take mock tests, when you do homework, right, do you guys check your work afterwards? Do you take up all the time that is allocated to you to make sure that you have no mistakes? Or the moment you finish, you're like, okay, finish, right? Let's shake leg, play computer games, do whatever. Let's hand in our paper early so we can go home. Okay, so It's what I realized, at least from many students in my class, right? So the first step to not being careless is to make sure you give yourself enough time to not be careless. And that includes checking your paper at the end multiple times over and over, right? Of course, some of you might ask, okay, Teacher Bell, how do we check our paper? Right? So here, off grid, I'll just tell you guys some easy ways to make sure that your answer is correct. Okay? It's not written here because they're not exactly politically correct, right? But, well, it's very helpful to you guys. The first is make sure y'all have common sense. What do I mean by this? All right, so when you take the PSLE, you might have questions that be like, oh, can you tell me Teacher Bell's age, right? Next year, maybe that's your question. And I'll have students will answer, oh, 999 years old, or 888 years old, or whatever strange answer, even negative age that some people come up with. Is that possible? If you really think about it, clearly something has gone wrong in your working, right? So the moment you see your answer doesn't make sense, then you should immediately check your working, all right? Don't just write the answer then be like, yeah, let's move on, okay? So the first step to being not careless is to have common sense, okay? I hope everyone in the chat here, right, you guys are all pretty sensible, whether your kids, right, or your parents trying to advise your kids. Make sure that your answer is possible. Okay, the second is, of course, a more straightforward method. Maybe your teachers have also covered this in class, right? What you want to do is to plug your answer back into the question, right? For example, if your question is like, oh, what percentage do we end up with? You plug in the percentage you get, you work backwards, you see whether you get the question or the numbers in your question. Okay, so that's another very useful method. The last method, all right, is to use another way to get your answer. So I have many students who are very good at algebra, okay? And a lot of word problems, they like to use algebra to get your answer. That's fine, right? But once you've used algebra, when you're checking your work, maybe you guys can use models, okay? And if it gives you the same answer, then most likely you've got it right. Well, I say this over and over, right? But it doesn't really strike students and parents until, the bad end of it happens, right? Which is actually the case of several of our students from last year as well, and also many students across Singapore. So I don't know if you guys know, but last year's PSLE paper was ridiculously simple, for the lack of a better phrase. All right, it was very, very easy compared to all the previous years, and so much so that it appeared in the Straits Times, parents asked the MOE, right, to recheck their papers because many students who have consistently scored AL1 ended up getting like AL3, 4, 5. And this actually happened to, I think, a few of our students from last year as well. Consistently, always 90 and above, but somehow didn't do that well for the PSLE. So in the end, right, we did find, after looking through their papers, their answers versus the correct answers, right, that the biggest problem is being careless. Because if the paper is easy, everyone can solve the question, right? So if you don't solve the question because you're careless, then it doesn't matter if you're good or not at math, okay? So this is why being careful nowadays is especially important, because the MOE has explicitly said they're cutting down the difficulty of the PSLE. So it's no longer probably as important to be great at math. It's more important to make sure you guys have clear workings, clear train of thought, the correct answer, okay? So the thing that I would encourage all students, all parents to focus on for now, right, is making sure that your child can get over this problem of carelessness by checking, maintaining clear workings, right, and using up all the time they're given. Okay, so that's one issue of carelessness, right? We can discuss this further if you guys have other questions about, any strategies you can think of to not be careless, right? But for now, let's talk about another big issue, right? Which is this second part of carelessness, workings, right? I mentioned earlier, writing workings is incredibly important, right? And for example, Does this look like any of your submissions for your homework? Right? Maybe some of us, we don't really like to write workings, especially for easy questions. But believe it or not, workings can save your life. Why? Because the working could give you the 1 mark that's the difference between 89 and 90. Okay, so when you take your PSLE, in section B, section C, if you don't know how to do or your answer is wrong, right, workings awards you method marks. So from now on, right, I would like all students and all parents in the chat to take note as well, right? Please remind yourselves and your kids to write proper workings, whether it's for homework or for the actual PSLE, all right? It will pay off when you get that extra 1 or 2 marks because you guys wrote nice workings. Okay, so workings are a matter of good habits, right? You don't suddenly learn how to write good workings during the PSLE. It's a long-term process to train your clarity of thought, right? That you guys have to do daily when you do your homework. Okay, so that said, next topic, time management. All right, so time management used to be a much bigger issue when the PSLE had more difficult questions in it. Okay, but of course, Teacher Bell is not a prophet, right? I am not psychic. I cannot tell you for sure that this year's PSLE is going to be easy or difficult, right? So no matter what, if the paper ends up being difficult, then everyone here should be prepared, all right, to manage your time very, very carefully. Do you spend 30 minutes on a question that you don't know, or do you move on, right? Or, should I start from the difficult questions? Should I start from the easier questions? So these are all things that you wouldn't be able to answer unless you've been in similar exam environments, okay? And for those of us students in the chat who you guys have been to math Olympiads, you guys have been to various competitions, right? You'll know that during the actual thing, during your actual competition, the amount of pressure you guys have is very different from your daily practice, right? Whether it's in sports, whether you're doing your homework, it's different, right? So make sure that you put yourself into similarly timed conditions before you actually go for the PSLE. Okay. So for parents who are here with us today, right, I would strongly encourage you guys to give your kids time practice, all right? So if you find, past year PSLE papers or assessment books, you can just print it out, right? Give them, okay, you guys have 2 hours, go, 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 okay? So that's very useful, especially as we get closer to the PSLE, okay? So yeah, I see some people in the chat, right? They say that, oh, we know how to do questions during practice, but during exams, suddenly my mind blanks out. Right? And other people say we should start from difficult or we should start from easy. So you guys need to figure out what is your best strategy. It's different for everybody, right? And you don't know unless you put yourself in similar situations before the actual PSLE. All right, don't use the PSLE to experiment. You should have finished all your experiments before you know yourself, you know your math ability, then you take the PSLE. All right. So with that said, okay, finally, right, I want to also say, before we talk about our programs, right, I want to say like the PSLE is very important. I'm sure all of us know that, right? But it's not, the end. Whether you do well or not in the PSLE, right, obviously, ideally you do well, right? But whether you do well or not, life goes on. Okay, so you guys should put pressure on yourselves, but don't put too much pressure on yourselves, especially in the weeks leading up to the PSLE. All right, so early for me to say this, but I've had students last year who studied super, super hard and then fell sick the week before the PSLE and they had to take all their exams with a runny nose. All right, that cannot be well. So make sure you guys take good care of yourselves, right? Live life as usual, work hard, but don't work too hard. Okay, so with that said, right, let's talk a little bit about how Think Academy can help you guys. Okay, so we have a lot of programs. A lot of these are free. So maybe you guys would like to listen up. We have a lot of resources. And if you would like to do well in your PSLE, right, we're more than happy to help you out. Okay, so first of all, let me introduce our long-term courses, right? So these are our semester courses. that last all the way until the PSLE itself. Okay, and so there are on several days, we have big classes by me, as well as small classes by Teacher Jason. The most important difference is that in big class, you have up to like 40 or 50 classmates, so it's more of a lecture style. And for small class, it's basically like 9 to 10 people, right? And you have a lot fewer classmates, so you're able to speak to the teachers directly. Okay, so we're covering almost all the topics within the PSLE, and it's about 100 minutes every lesson. So we've already had our syllabus out for semester 2, so you guys can have a look, right? These are some of the important topics that we're covering for the first 14 lessons, right? Whether or not you guys come for our program, I highly recommend that even if you do self-study, right, make sure you guys are familiar with these topics, okay? Especially the word problem topics. All right, many of us are not good at reading questions, all right, and you guys might experience this in your own exams, right? Make sure we have enough practice reading questions, understanding questions, okay? So you can see we've covered circles, right? Speed, patterns, geometry, a lot of very important topics, right? If you guys would like to learn more about the syllabus, feel free to hit me up after this seminar as well, okay? So other than that, right, we also, for our current long-term course students, I know quite a few of you guys are in the chat. All right, if you register for the next semester, we do have a 5% discount as well as 3 free classes available for you guys. All right, so if you like more information about these, please let me know after the seminar. I can explain further as well. All right, so apart from that, okay, we have 3 bonus lessons that actually everybody's welcome to attend. And these are 3 of the super important topics. All right, the first one is percentage, which I already saw that several people typed earlier was a difficult topic, right? You guys only was exposed to percentage last year, but in P6, they'll be combining percentage with other topics. Like you can have percentage with volume or percentage with speed. All right, so you guys make sure you're aware on how percentage relationships work, okay? The second is heuristics. Now, this is a very, very broad topic, and it covers all the difficult word problems that you guys hate to hear about. And these include excess shortage, your favorite, all right? Assumption method or simultaneous equations, right? All of these fall under heuristics. Typically, they are considered to be fairly challenging topics. Last but not least, all right, your actual favorite though, angles. Okay, triangles, quadrilaterals, right? Most of angles topics tend to not be so hard, but believe me, all right, there have been many difficult angles problems in the past as well. Okay, and other than that, right, we also have short-term courses available, which are much cheaper than our long-term courses. So these will be 6 lessons, all right, and generally these short-term course at least is more suitable for students currently at the AL3 or 4 level, right? You guys took your P5 results, right? You guys know roughly what grade you're at. So for this short-term course, it's 6 sessions, right? So it's on Thursday, 5 p.m. to 6:30, and you guys can choose between the timings, whichever one is suitable for you. All right, they're taught by Teacher Jason, $35 per session. If you're interested, all right, let us know afterwards as well. Okay, and now, all right, we do have future programs available. So one thing that's held by me is the PSLE Bootcamp. This will start in July. So this is a hyper-intensive course for AL1 and 2 students to make sure that you guys maintain your current level. So you can expect the questions covered to be quite challenging. All right, so finally, all right, I think one important thing to discuss at this point is whether or not you're taking tuition, whether or not, you guys are focused in your classes or taking a lot of math, right? It's important to know where you currently stand, right? And that also helps you to manage your expectations actually going into the PSLE, right? So, I mean, to be very frank, right? Some of us, especially parents, right? If you've seen your child's P5 results, 1 year is a lot of time, but not many people can pull off miracles, right? So for example, going from AL6 to AL1, that could be a very big jump. I'm not saying it's not possible, right? But there will be a lot of time, effort, and luck that's needed for it to happen. Okay, so at the moment, we need to be pretty realistic about where our child currently stands, right? And how best to help them improve. So one best way is, for those of you who have seen your kids' results at the end of P5, right? You would see their AL for P5. My suggestion is to take the AL and -1, all right? Because P6 teaches a lot of new topics, and generally what we cover, the type of questions are a lot more challenging than whatever you face in primary 5. And of course, your student standards may have changed, right? Some of your kids have rapidly improved, or some of us might have gotten addicted to video games and not spend as much time on math, right? So it's hard to say. And not to mention that P6 math is fundamentally very different, right? So we need a good yardstick to know where our students or where our kids are currently at. So here's where we would introduce our trial lessons as well as our selection tests. So most of these are completely free, or they might cost like $10, which is not too bad, I would say, right? So here are all of the timings that are available. And I would especially pay notice to these mock test trial lessons because they are full-length timed mock tests, and teacher Jason will be going through the questions afterwards, right? So it's very useful for knowing where you currently stand and what topics we need to improve at, okay? So if you need to know or need to see what courses we have available, you guys can log on to our website, and under courses, just click primary 6 and everything should be displayed there. All right, so yeah, to end today's seminar section, let me just say, teachers are the guide those who are willing to be guided. Okay, so for the students in our chat, your parents can help you, your teachers can help you, right? But that is only if you yourself, you're willing to be helped, right? You guys should know by now the PSLE is coming soon. It's very important, right, in setting you up for the next step of your life. All right, so whether or not, you've done well in math previously, whether or not you've done well in your previous subjects, right, I think it's time that we take this pretty seriously, right? So if you have any questions about the PSLE, here's the time to ask your school teachers, ask your parents for help, ask in your group chat, ask your friends, right, and support each other throughout the process. Okay, so with that, let me just end today's seminar. All right, and for the last few minutes, maybe we can go ahead and have some Q&A, right? If you guys have questions for me about DSA, PSLE, secondary schools, right, shoot, feel free. All right, and I'll try to answer as many as I can. Okay. So let's have a look here. All right, the first question I see is, okay, yeah, we need to focus. So for our lessons, right? Yes, for Think Academy, so what we do, right, is for the homework, we require students to upload their workings for certain selected questions. All right, but for other questions, maybe just the answer is required. Okay, but on the other hand, when we have consults or special sessions, 1v1 sessions with our students, what I will do is require students to showcase their workings, right? So that I can make sure that everybody is on track and able to write down their thoughts clearly. Okay, so someone else asked, if I score AL3 in P5, then I will most likely score AL4 in P6. Well, if you do the same amount of studying in P5 or you don't really study, I would say that's probably true. All right, but it's P6. I'm sure you guys put in a lot more effort, right? You guys are going to do a lot more mock tests. Your math is going to improve. Right? So I would say, it doesn't mean you're going to score 1 tier lower. It just means that we need to work hard in order to maintain our standard or score higher. Okay. How many marks do we need to score for RGS? So this year, the cutoff for RGS is AL4 to AL6. So you guys can kind of count, right? Which subjects you're good at, maybe we guarantee AL1. Which subjects you're not so good at, you can have up to 2 subjects that you're allowed in AL2, okay? But still, right, that's assuming that not that many people apply, right? And all of AL4 to AL6 is accepted. So ultimately, right, our goal should still be AL4 in order to guarantee acceptance into RGS. Okay, what are the timings for the PSLE bootcamp? Let's have a look. All right, I think over here, yeah. So you guys can see the timings are mostly on Saturday afternoon. Though, of course, this is subject to change, right? If a lot of parents reflect that maybe this timing is not so suitable, we might open another session or we could change this time. So do let me know if you're interested. Selection test for the bootcamp. Generally, yes, there will be, but you guys can basically come for any of these like selection tests or the mock tests, right? If your marks are all recorded into our system. So if we see that you've consistently, done pretty well, then there won't be any selection for you for the bootcamp. All right, for sports DSA, will it be interview or showing talent? So you need both. All right, I DSA for math, but it's more or less the same, right? First of all, you have to submit your certificates in sports, your medals, right? What have you participated in? What have you won? Maybe you're the leader of your sports team, right? You need your portfolio to be there. Once they see your portfolio and they're like, oh, this person's pretty good, right? If you are like a star, they might not need you for an interview, but most of the time they'll interview you. All right, so my experience was RGS called me for an interview, right? I went down, I spoke with, I think, the HOD at that time, as well as the principal, all right? And during that interview, they asked a lot of very strange questions. Okay, so what kind of strange questions do I mean? They basically asked things like, oh, if you could be a item in this room, what would you be? I mean, you ask P6 students that what kind of answers do you expect, but I said something along the lines of, I would like to be a chair because, oh gosh, that was lame, all right? But I said, I would like to be a chair so I can support other people. But, you can come up with your own answers. Anyway, that's the kind of questions you guys can expect during your DSA interview. It's not solely going to talk about your school stuff. They're not going to ask you math questions, but it's more of a personality test. All right. Next question, will all word problems or selected be marked in big class? The difference between big and small class. All right, so for big class, it's basically, it's more of a lecture style. All right, so the students are not able to speak to the teacher during class. All right, let me just put this out there. I cannot hear the students. However, I cannot interact with the students because I can pull you up on stage to ask you questions, or we'll play games, interactive games during class where I will see who's paying attention and who's not. All right, students can also type in chat to discuss with the teacher, very much like you guys are doing now. So class is different. It's more of a like discussion based. So we have fewer students, but everyone's free to talk. All right, and you can basically interrupt with questions or discuss questions with your fellow classmates. All right, class has consults, but only mass consults. So I'll do one weekly session to go through the homework. For small class, all right, it's more of a, I guess, free time with the teachers, right? Whenever you are free, I am free. If you have questions, we can schedule a consult to go through them. Okay. So how much do we have to pay for the bootcamp? Prices are not fixed yet. I would expect maybe 35. We'll let you guys know at a later date closer to the beginning of it in July. Okay. For now, though, if you're interested in the foundation boosters, maybe for those of us who need a little bit more practice, right? It's already fixed at $35 per session. How to study for percentage and fractions, how to study for patterns. The first and foremost advice I can give you guys is to practice. I know, it sounds lame, right? But the more you practice, the more kind of questions you'll see, right? And the other advice I can give you is, if you face a difficult question, do not skip the question, all right? Circle it, ask Teacher Bell in the group, right? Ask our Think Academy admins in the group, ask your school teachers, ask your parents, make sure you figure it out before the PSLE, all right? For percentage and fractions, I have one additional piece of advice, which is to make sure your calculation skills are there, because most percentage, fractions, decimals questions come out in section A and B. You guys don't have your calculators. So y'all better make sure that you guys can calculate it carefully. If your kid is currently in the PSLE Elite course, can you enroll to PSLE Bootcamp? Yes, you can. The content is pretty different. Now, I would say that some topics might overlap, but because I'm doing the bootcamp, I'm going to make harder questions, all right, because this is targeted for AL1 and 2. So if you guys would like to experience the newspaper appearing side of the PSLE, all right, you guys can come for the bootcamp. Of course, there will be a range of questions, right? But you can expect it to be roughly around the same as our elite course, maybe sometimes slightly harder, okay? But different questions, so feel free to apply for both if you feel you need the extra practice. All right, how to enroll for the booster selection test? You guys can go to our website and click the P6 link. I think all of the classes are there. All right, our Think Academy assistant will also be sending the links into the groups. You can contact them directly if you have any, if you need any help, or you can ask me on WhatsApp as well. Is there a test for the elite course? Yes, there is. If you guys want to enter our elite course, actually also the excellence course, you will have to take a selection test. Right, but I would say that it's not too bad. If you need help with the test, or if you have any questions about it, feel free to ask me afterwards as well. With the math, also you guys, if you're in math competition, you still need to go for PSLE bootcamp. Okay, I think I will answer this question in a broader scale. Okay, some of us in the chat here have done Math Olympiad, right? So I understand all too well, because for the first half, 3/4 of my P6 year, I was basically I was doing Math Olympiad papers. So all my time was spent on things like SMOPS, right? I think now they call it APMOPS. You also have your RIPMWC, right? If you know, you know. If you do Math Olympiad, you know. So I think the main thing is when you study for Math Olympiad, you don't learn the methods you need to do well in the PSLE. All right, so you can use algebra to solve all the questions, right? But there might come some questions where you need specific types of models or specific types of ratio. So of course, you can rely on your competition to have a basic knowledge of math, right? But you still need to do practice papers before the PSLE to make sure you know what the schools teach and what methods you're expected to write for the PSLE, all right? So if you feel that you're very familiar with school math, right, you don't really need to learn these, then you don't have to come for the bootcamp, right? But I feel the bootcamp is pretty useful, just at least to teach you on what kind of workings are expected, right? What are the common methods? What are the common types of questions? Okay, this is just coming from somebody who's done the exact route of MO to PSLE. I think I might have lost some marks during the PSLE because of no workings. Right, maybe especially Math Olympiad kids, you are very prone to this. Make sure you know how to write workings for your school exams. All right, you have to learn about angles. So for angles, I would say you have a lot of resources in the past year papers, right? You guys can get some practice, but generally for angles, you need to remember the 3 major types of angles, all right? Alternate, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm teaching a class right now. Alternate angles, corresponding angles, and vertically opposite angles. All right, if you know these 3 relationships, you can solve many of the PSLE questions. Does the to top schools look like subject results and achievements? Yeah, they look at everything, right? So if you apply for math, for example, right? Or if you apply for art, of course, your math and art needs to be exceptional, right? But your other subjects cannot be super bad. This is the same whether you're applying to JC through JAE, or in the future, if you like to apply to university, right? They look at you all rounded, but you need to have a few bright points where you stand out in. Sessions for the PSLE bootcamp, I think it's 6, probably. Yeah, the AL1 should be 6 as well. I will check further on the details. Right now, I think it's 6. I'll let you guys know more information closer to the date of July. Yeah, no worries. So yeah, I think, are there any more questions for me about any part of primary 6? I know it's a very stressful year for your kids, right? If you guys need any help for math, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us in the WhatsApp groups as well. Okay, so I guess that's no more questions. Yeah. All right. So in that case, all right, thank you everybody for coming down on this Sunday evening. Okay, and yeah, if you guys need anything else, please let me know into the groups. All right, you're welcome, Haley's mommy. I'm glad it was helpful. I hope it was helpful. Right, if you have other questions, feel free to text me directly. Okay, so yeah, other than that, thank you all for coming and hope to see you guys in some of our programs. Right, if you need help for math, let me know, let teacher Jason know. Okay. Oh, is teacher Jason's lessons online or on-site? We have two options. There is an online version, there is an offline version. So if you guys are interested in either, you can let us know. All right, I think the first one here is online, the 6th April to 11th May one. The 18th May to 23rd June, this one's offline, which will be useful because it's during your school holidays, more or less. All right, okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. I hope it was helpful. All right. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And yeah, if you guys need help, feel free to text us anytime. All right. Bye-bye, everyone. Okay, see you guys.